to turn off Do Not Disturb. And I forgot to put the light on, but I don't know how to do it now. Okay. We're starting. And to everybody's watching, Chaya, who's in Glasgow, and Mata Esther, who's down the street, and Ron, who's in Ma'ale Adumim, and Michal, who's sometimes here and sometimes in Poland. So welcome to everybody, and Rachel is also watching. I think they're in Pardes Chana now. And to my mother, who's traveling I think she's in the Galapagos Islands. I don't know where she is. Somewhere on an island, somewhere in the world. My mother. And, of course, we want to dedicate the lesson to the refuah of anybody who's been injured, anybody who's sick at all, and also Avital, who watches the lesson, who's currently on a vacation in the hospital. Oh, you're in Kiryat Arba. Wow, they moved to Kiryat Arba. Now they're serious. Ron, who used to come to the class, who was in Ma'ale Adumim, now he's in Kiryat Arba.
Is that the north, right?
Kiryat Arba is next to Hebron. And my brother-in-law, Adi, checked in. Okay, we want to dedicate the class, of course, to everybody who needs a refuah, and that Hashem figure out how to bring back the people that were kidnapped, and that Hashem grant us victory in this war, an absolute victory, and that we stay unified as a nation as well. You know, it's amazing how just before this war, the country's falling to pieces, and now everybody's got it together. It's unfortunate that it takes a war. And that's actually what we've been learning in this class. That's actually what we were learning last week, and maybe you don't remember the lesson. But he says that the chen v'chashivut is what Rabbi Nachman calls it. The grace and the importance of the Jewish people is now by the non-Jews because the Jews are not connected to the Torah. Because if a Jew lives their life simply like any other person, there's cultural Jews and then there's observant Jews. There are people that keep Torah and mitzvot. So he says, if you're just a cultural Jew, you're not connected to Torah and mitzvot, so you're not going to get the chen, the chashivut, the grace and importance that Hashem wants for the Jewish people. Instead, it's going to the non-Jews. And in a sense, we see that playing out now. I don't know what the end of this whole thing is going to be, but I know there's people that have collected money for thousands and thousands of tzitziot. I heard that in Me'er Sharim there are Haredim that are tying tzitziot on camouflage garments to bring to soldiers, and every soldier that's offered it wants to take these tzitziot. I mean, you could not imagine standing in Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv saying to people, you want tzitziot, and they would grab them. Or even standing outside of an army base and they would grab them. But now, unfortunately, it took this tragedy for people to embrace their Judaism, to embrace their unity, their love for one another, Be'ezrat Hashem. And that's a bit what Rabbi Nachman is saying, is like if you don't connect with these things to start with, then you're going to lose the power that comes along with them. And hopefully we're going to get the power back, Be'ezrat Hashem.
But in some ways, it's kind of like where a lot of people have like a personal tragedy or some type of wake-up call to...
Yeah, that's all the time, unrelated to the war.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Somebody has, God forbid, some disease or something, and then it makes them change their habits. Rabbi Nachman has a lesson about that. We've learned it in the past. He says one of the reasons that a person gets sick, chas v'shalom, God forbid, is because they're not fulfilling their purpose here on earth, like their spiritual purpose. And the soul says to the body, listen, I was forced from the supernal realms into this physical body so that you would do with the body what the soul needs to do. But if you're spending all of your time doing things that are not connected to Torah and mitzvot, no reason for me to be here, I'm checking out. And so a person starts to get sick. And he says, chas v'shalom. And he says, so what happens? The doctor says, sorry, you can't eat any more herring. I remember my grandfather, when he was like 96 or something, he says to me, oh, my doctor said I have a heart problem and I can't eat herring anymore. Like, you're 96, it's pretty good to get a heart problem that late. And he survived World War II in Normandy and had shrapnel from the Nazis in his leg and craziness and diabetes. Still lived to 97, I think. So, but here he stopped eating herring, he stopped eating salty foods. So the soul says, so you do know how to change. So since you know how to change, I'll get you to be healthy again, but this time change for doing Torah and mitzvot. And that's kind of what's happening on, I guess, a cosmic level, on a higher level. Hashem is saying to the Jewish people, you're not doing what you're supposed to do? And I'm not saying that the Rabbi Nachman is saying that a tragedy had to come in order to make this happen. But a tragedy did come, and it did make things happen. It is making things happen. And Be'ezrat Hashem, it'll be a push forward, really, for us to live up to our fullest potential. So he starts up the lesson. He says there's this chen v'chashivut, is how he calls it, grace and importance, when the Jewish people are connected to Torah and mitzvot. And when they're not, then they lose it. And there are many concepts in this lesson. There's the Yetzer Hara, there's the Yetzer Tov, there's Yaakov, and there's Esav. And there's living a spiritual life and a physical life. And it's a bit of a long lesson. We're learning from lesson Aleph, the first lesson, Likutey Moharan. And it's a little bit of a complicated lesson, but I think we're going to get through it. And you'll see now this lesson is built on layers that interact with one another. So if you imagine, like the Olympic symbol, where, all the circles go on top of one another, that's how this lesson works. So we started off, I'm just going to read it really quickly. Da ki al yedei ha-Torah she'anu lomdim nitkablim b'shamayim kol tefillot v'kol bakashot. You should know that through the Torah that we learn, all of your prayers and all of your requests are accepted in heaven. שאנו מבקשים ומתפללים זאת משם שעל ידי לימוד תורה, חן וחשיבות של עם ישראל נתעלה ונתרומם מפני כל מי שצריכים. And through the learning of Torah, we merit through our davening that this grace and importance of the Jewish people will be elevated and risen up, in order that everybody who asks for whatever they ask for will reach Hashem. בפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ובפני בני אדם שצריך מהם טובות, and by any person that needs some beneficial thing. הן ברוחניות והן בגשמיות, whether it's a physical thing or a spiritual thing. So he's saying your davening reaches heaven through your learning Torah. You need to have both. And then he gave the example of the guy who came to Rabbi Nachman, and he said, I'm basically a shlemazel, nobody's giving me any respect in my community. And he said, after you finish davening, you need to learn a little bit of Torah, learn some Mishnah, learn the Chumash, learn something. And the guy said, okay, and he tries to do it, and he's not able. He says, Rabbi Nachman, I don't understand what I'm learning. And the Rebbe said, you just keep going and going and going until little by little, a little bit of light will come in, and then a little bit more light, and a little bit more light, and it'll show you the way. And not only will you grow in your Torah mitzvot, you'll be respected by the people in your community. You want to ask a question? Just stretch it. Oh, once I'm going to finish the statement. And he did it, and he came back to Rabbi Nachman, and he said it worked. Okay, yeah, what do you want to say?
When you said that he wasn't able to, you mean he wasn't able to comprehend it?
Yeah.
Or he wasn't able to focus on it?
He wasn't able to comprehend it. So Rabbi Nachman said, just read the words, even if you don't understand it. Because slowly you'll start to grasp what you're learning. Now, I don't know how it is for other people, but that's how it is for me as well. Like if I start something and I don't understand it, I know that eventually, if I just stick with it, I'll piece it together. That's how I learned Arabic, for example. When I was in the Hebrew University, when I was at Princeton, the Hebrew University, I was studying Arabic, and I would sit with these texts that look like this, but they're in Arabic. And like every other word I didn't understand, I'd write them in the margins, I'd write them in notebooks, and then I realized, oh, the words are coming again and again. The phrases are coming again and again. I'm starting to remember them. At some point, I can pick up a newspaper. I can't do that anymore, but I used to be able to pick up a newspaper and read the whole article and understand what's going on. So that's the idea, that you just stick with it and you'll get it. So now he brings this concept that we have to, let me just see if there's anything else here. I think that covered, and then he calls it Yalat Chen. So, Yelet Ahuvim v'Yalet Chen. He brings a quote from Mishlei, that the Torah is called Yalat Chen, and this is a name that people give to girls, Yalat Chen, Yelet Chen, because it's a name for the Torah. And Yalat Chen means to elevate the Chen, the grace, and the importance of the Jewish people, and how do you do it through learning Torah. So then he brings a new level to the lesson. He says, Yeve'er shetzarich lekasher et ot bet, et bet ha'otiot, bet ha'otiot, nun v'chet, v'az na'aseh chen. So he says, we have these two letters. One is the chet, and one is the nun. And we have to bring them together. So the chet was standing for, I think, davening, and the nun was standing for Torah. And when we bring Torah and davening together, we get chen. We get this grace and importance, and I guess being beloved in the eyes of Hashem. When we bring the two together, davening and Torah. So you have to bring the both of them together. V'chen yeve'er ki ha'isha Yisraeli. So this is one of Rabbi Nachman's phrases, ha'isha Yisraeli. That's what he calls a Jew a lot of the time. And of course, Israelis, whenever they learn this, like, oh, Rabbi Nachman was a Zionist. I don't know how much Zionism there was, if there was anything in the time of Rabbi Nachman. He died in 1810. I'm pretty sure that Zionism really started in the 1850s. But he didn't mean that. We're going to explain it in just a second. So he's going to say, Ha'isha Yisraeli b'chinat nun. So the Jew is the aspect of the nun, and that's the Torah, v'atorah. V'hi asechem shem kol davar. And this is the wisdom within everything. She b'chinat chet, which is the chet, ve'al yedei chibur bet ha'b'chinot halalu na'aseh chen. So now, I have a friend I'm going to explain this in just a second. I have a friend, he's a big hedge fund manager, and he said to me, "Oh, you learn Likutey Moharan?" I said, "Yeah, I give a class in Likutey Moharan." He said, "But you don't understand anything, right? Because it's so confusing. You can't understand anything here." I said, No. You just go slow and you understand it. So when you hear stuff like this, you're like, what is Rabbi Nachman talking about? This is connected to the Jew, this is connected to the Torah, and connect this and connect that. But we're going to go slowly, and we're going to explain everything. We're going to figure it out together. Ki ha'isha Yisraeli. So that's the phrase that I mentioned before. And there's a note over here. Mizeh she'nakat Rabbeinu ish ha'Yisraeli. This is Rabbi Nachman uses this phrase, the Israeli man, or the Jewish man, the Israeli person really. Lo nakat ish Yehudi. He didn't use the phrase a Jewish person. Yesh lefaresh sheYisrael. Note, what is this word here? Notrikon. I guess the source for it is, or I guess the rearranging the letters of it is Li Yisrael, right? So Li Rosh. Yisrael is Li Rosh. I have a head. Verosh meramez ala sechel ve'amochim. And when we talk about Rosh, head, we're talking about your intellect and your mind, your ability to think. V'zeo isha Yisraeli. This is the meaning. This is why he uses the word isha Yisraeli, meaning that the Jew that uses their brain and thinks. Hainu shemistaken b'sechel shehu harosh shen kol davar. That is, that the person looks at what is the meaning behind all of these things. So now we start again. Ki isha Yisraeli. So now we understand when he says, meaning the Jewish person that's using their brain and thinking, tzarich tamid listekel ba'asechel shel kol davar, has to look at what is the intellect, what is the meaning, what is the wisdom behind everything. Ki b'chol davar gashmi, because in every physical thing, sheyeshno ba'olam, that there is in the world, tamun bo sechel v'chochma, there's wisdom and there's knowledge in everything. So last week I showed the pic, and I explained that there's many levels of wisdom and knowledge in just this little piece of plastic. First of all, you have plastic on the chemical level, which I have a son-in-law who's a chemist. I'm sure he could explain it to me. And then you have the color, and you have the design, and you have like a little thing here that makes it easier to hold it, and the flexibility, and there's many things that you can just learn from this physical object. How it was designed, how it was made, from one little thing. Here, I can take the sticker, and the same thing as well. How did somebody come up with this thing that sticks, but it sticks again, and to make this piece of plastic, and to put the color in it,
and everything is for a purpose.
Yeah, and
each one has its own purpose.
There was a lot of thought that went into this simple little object. That's the point that he's saying. Like every object that you see here, everything physical that you see in the room, and I'm not even talking about organic things like us. I'm just saying, like the book, the cup, the bottle, the air conditioner, and all the parts of the air conditioner, and all of those things is chokhmah, is some wisdom and knowledge that somebody put into that thing. And he says, and what's the thing that keeps us together? Because this is actually just atoms and molecules. The truth is I don't understand that stuff. I just know that it's there somewhere. How do they not break apart? How do they stay together? Because if you take a microscope to every single object and you zoom into the molecular level, I think almost everything looks the same. Like if you zoom in far enough, it looks like space in a sense. And so how is it that if there's space between everything, that my hands don't go into one another, that the table stays solid, that a piece of wood is solid? And what Rabbi Nachman explains, and the Jewish religion explains, Shua chiyut elokit. This is the godly vitality that's within every physical object. So within every physical object is kind of, in a sense, godly chokhmah, godly knowledge. Just like there's human knowledge in here, there's also godly knowledge within a physical object, hamechayeh umekayem oto, that keeps it in existence and makes it stay around. Ve'al ha'adam nistekel b'chol davar, and now it's a person's obligation to look at every single thing, ve'le'ot bo et ha'chiyut ha'elokit sheyeshna bo, and to see the godly vitality that's within everything. So, like, we can understand water. We know that water is H2O. I don't know how to make water. Apparently, if you know chemistry, you could probably take hydrogen and oxygen and mix it in the right way, and all of a sudden there'd be steam, and the steam would condense, and then it would turn into water. So we understand that there's this godly wisdom. Sound is on and off. Okay. I don't know if that's because of me. I'll move this a little bit. Maybe that'll make it easier. There's godly wisdom in water, for example. And so when we see the water, we can just see the physical water, or we can see that God is making something. Now mostly off. Okay. Let's see if this makes it better. I don't know. Maybe that's a problem with the microphone. Maybe where I'm positioning it. Okay, you'll tell me. I have to take care of the microphone for this phone. I always forget. Okay. Mechayem mekayem oto, is that better, Matester? V'ala adam lisakem b'chol davar lirot bo et chiyut elokit sheyesh bo. You have to look at the spiritual energy, the godly energy that's within everything. Shehi chochmato yitbarach, which is Hashem's wisdom. Sheba barat hadavar, Hashem created the thing. V'al yidei zeh yizkel yitkarev v'ladat et Hashem. And through this, oh, everyone says they can't hear very well. I don't know. I'll hold the phone right here. And through this, now can you hear me better? No, we'll see in a second. And through this, you come to learn Hashem. By looking at the wisdom in everything, you come to learn Hashem. You get to... Sorry, it was you? Oh, Ron? What? I don't know. Never mind. I love all you lovely people. I just got to focus on the lesson, and I don't know what's going on, but hopefully you'll figure it out. Are you, what, you want to sit over there? You can rest. It really doesn't bother me. Are you okay? Okay. So we have to look at the godly wisdom within everything. So now you understand what he's saying. What is the lesson that he's bringing in this concept here? He's saying that in everything in your life, okay, good. Sharon Sanders writes, I hear you fine, and she's half deaf. So that's a good sign. Here, I moved the phone closer so my voice will at least be project more. You have to look at the godliness in everything. So you understand the example. Here he's saying, in a physical thing, there's a lot of wisdom. In a thing like water, here's the water, there's godly wisdom. And in everything in your life, there's also godly wisdom, and there is something behind it. Meaning, if a person says, why, now I'm not going to explain something like the massacre that happened in the South. I don't explain things like the Holocaust or massacres. Can't explain that. But when somebody has like some problem, and they say, why do I have this problem? There's some godly wisdom behind that thing. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life that's happening right now. So we have a war. It's not an existential war in a sense where there's people walking in the streets threatening us right here, but it's a war that if we don't win this war, our country really can't exist. And just to explain that briefly, if you can't protect your citizens, you can't have a country. And we're surrounded by enemies, and if our enemies see that we can't protect ourselves, they'll all attack us, and we're all either dying, kidnapped, or on our way out of the country. So that's how important this war is. And the people that have been called up to reserve duty are showing up. I heard 130%, which means that 100% was called up, and 30% more showed up, even though they weren't called up. And I'm not in the army anymore. I used to be in an artillery unit. Didn't like it very much. I hated my army service. I was miserable most of the time. But I don't get drafted anymore. But I feel this push to do something to help the country. And I know that I'm capable of speaking in public and of speaking to people. And I spent 30 years researching a book on Palestinian propaganda in the Western media, which I apparently may never write. But I have all this wisdom, and so I feel like I have to contact journalists and start speaking in the international media. And it's really not something that I want to be doing. So I can say to myself, this is the point that I'm making here. And I spoke with a couple of journalists today, so things are starting to move forward. I said to Hashem, why are you doing this to me? I don't want to be in this position. But there's a sechem there's a meaning and a purpose behind everything that happens in your life. So sometimes when, God forbid, someone is kidnapped or maimed or killed, you can't find the meaning in that. Maybe ever, but for sure not in the beginning. But something like what's happening with me, where I feel like I have to talk with people, I can talk with people, I have the knowledge and the ability to talk with people, and I can't sit on the side. It's causing me a lot of discomfort. And I ask Hashem, why? And the answer is because there is some God, divine knowledge in that, in the circumstances and what's pushing me to do something that I normally wouldn't do. And so, a little bit later, we're not going to get it tonight, but a little bit later in the lesson, he's going to give us two sides of this coin. He's going to say, a person that knows that God is running the world, and things happen to that person, and they don't understand why it's happening to them, they can understand that there is a godly wisdom in it. And they can say, I have to find, why do I need to do this thing? For example, many people know I lead the davening in practically every shul that I daven in. I don't know why that happened, but the davening at Mayanot, when I davened at Mayanot the first time, 25 years ago or something like that, so I felt an urge inside of myself to lead the davening. I couldn't even read the words properly back then. And circumstances happened that the shul fell apart, and I was the only one that was going to carry the shul. And so I learned to read the Torah portion, and I learned to lead the davening. And now I don't read the Torah portion, and now there's multiple shuls that came out of this one shul. There's Kol Rina, there's Vani Tfilah, there's the Korazin Minyanot down over here, and then there's Mayanot, and there might be even more for all I know. But at the moment that happened, it was something I felt within myself, there was something I needed to do, but I didn't have the ability to do it, and it caused me a great deal of discomfort. And now, 25 years later, it doesn't cause me discomfort, and I can understand that this was something that Hashem wanted me to do in my life, and that's why I was pushed into something that I normally wouldn't do. And what he's saying here is that Ha'isha Yisraeli, the Jew that uses their brain, and not just to understand things on an intellectual level, but to understand things on a spiritual level, will look at Kol Davar. Tzarich tamid listekel ba'asechel shel kol davar. You have to look at what is God's intention behind everything that's happening in my life, and to look for it. And to know that it's connected to Torah and mitzvot, that it's connected to helping you grow in a spiritual way, and to come closer to Hashem. He's going to say later on, maybe we'll probably get to it next week, that so now he's going to say it's connected to Yaakov. He's going to give us a whole bunch of text proofs, and we'll skip over some of them, that Yaakov is connected to Chokhmah, it's connected to wisdom, and then he's going to bring Esav. Now we know that Yaakov and Esav, they're twins, they're brothers, they're two opposites. Esav was the man of the field, Yaakov was the one who sat in the tent and learned Torah. We know the story of Yitzchak, when Rachel said to, was Rachel, right? No, it's Rivka. Rivka said to Yaakov, I want you to get the blessing. Because the mother knows more than the father about the children. She said, I want you to get the blessing, and I'm going to slip you in there. I'm going to make the stew for you. I'm going to slip you in there, and you're going to pretend to be your brother. And it's this whole crazy episode which is coming up soon. We've talked about it in this class. The bottom line is that Yaakov had to become Esav. He had to become a man of the world, even though he was the guy who wanted to sit around and learn Torah. He had to do something that wasn't comfortable for him, it wasn't right for him, but that was what God intended for him in a positive way. And he's going to say, however, if you don't do that, and you're not going to look at the godly reason behind something, you're going to just look at the physical, normal way of looking at the world, then you're going to connect with the side of Esav. Esav is also a king. Yaakov is a king, and Esav is a king, meaning that they both have power. They both have equal power, except one is positive and one is negative. And a person that's only going to look at the world in a physical way is only going to want to connect with all the pleasures in the world, which is what Esav did. Because Esav said to Yaakov, I'm hungry. Make me some of that stew. And I'm famished. And he said, I'll give you the stew, but only if you sell me your birthright. He's like, what's the birthright to me? It doesn't mean anything. So what? That I sell you that I was born a second before you, now you're going to be born a second before me. It doesn't mean anything. And Rabbi Nachman says, you see, that's a person that's only interested in pleasure. He's willing to give up something so great as their birthright for just pleasure. A person is willing to give up being the holiness of a Jew just for pleasure. So that's where we're headed in the lesson. We're going to read a little bit more and then I'm going to share a story.
Sure.
Okay, you have to look at the wisdom that's within everything. And then to connect yourself to the wisdom. Is it too cold in here?
No, it's fine.
Just allergies.
Because
Okay. The wisdom and the knowledge that's within everything. That is in order to bring out within yourself, to enlighten within yourself, the godly, I'll just turn this off, I don't need it. The godly intellect in everything. Sheyesh b'chol davar, that's within everything, ulitkarev, and to come closer, Hashem yitbarach, al yedei oto davar, through the same thing, meaning that before the person had a challenge in their life and they didn't see how Hashem was helping them to grow, and then they simply looked at, why does Hashem want me to go through this challenge? And then they realized that it was in order for the person to come closer to Hashem, and the same thing that didn't have meaning before has meaning now. Stephen Covey, his famous book, it was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I didn't read the book. I just read the first few pages. This is what I got out of it. My wife is a big reader. She reads piles of books. So she read it. She said it was boring. Or sometimes she'll take the books and she'll just literally rip them out. And then she'll put it together and say, just read these 20 pages. This is all you need to know. Anyhow, it might be a great book. The truth is, I don't know. I think maybe I'll listen to it on audiobook. So he has this thing called the paradigm shift. Have you heard? I've probably told this example before. He said, I'm going to give you an example of paradigm shift. And by the way, tragic thing, this book became an international bestseller, and then he died. Also, the guy who wrote The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which was this huge, crazy bestseller, sold 100 million copies or something. He wrote 3 books, 3 volumes of it. He was a journalist in somewhere in Denmark or something like that. And the elevator was out in the office building that he was in. He was on the 6th floor. And he just walked up the stairs and it gave him a heart attack and he died. It's amazing. Incredible success, what some people want for their whole life, and then the person just dies. Stories like that, for me, make things, really bring things down to earth. Okay, so what's the paradigm shift? He said, I'm going to give you an example. I was on the subway in New York, and I'm coming home late at night, and these kids are really wild. They're going crazy, making noise and jumping on the benches. And I turn to the father and I say to him, can't you discipline your children? And he said, we just came back from the hospital and their mother died, and I don't know what to do.
I heard that one, yeah.
And so he said, so that's a paradigm shift. That you saw things in one way, and then a little piece of information completely turned it around. And that's what Rabbi Nachman is saying here. He said, when you're faced with something in your life, you see it one way. But when you look at the sechel sheyesh b'kol davar, the godly intellect that's within everything, it can change it and turn it around. The same exact thing that was bothering you now has meaning for you. Ki ha'sechel achiyut ha'elokit hu oru chani gadon, because this godly wisdom that's within everything is a great spiritual light. Umeir lo la'adam b'chol derachav. It's a light that gives a person light to see on the path. It's like somebody turns a light on and you can see where you're going. And this is exactly what it is, that a person before, they felt lost, there was no purpose, there was no meaning, and then they understood there was something godly in what was happening to them, and it turned everything around. And the person will know how to come close to Hashem, and to overcome all of the obstacles that are preventing a person from coming close to Hashem. As it's written, Chochmat Adam Ta'ir Panav. A person's wisdom will light up. Panav is their face, but it means bifanav, in front of them. Once they get like this spark of understanding something, it lights up the path for them. Hadam shezocheh lechochma alokit, a person who merits to godly wisdom, he me'ira lefanav b'chol derachav. It lights the way for the person on the entire journey. Hamidpashet milah panui panav kamo lefanav. So he's saying what I said before, that when it says chochmat adam te'ir panav, when it says a person's wisdom will light up their face, it really means it will light up the path in front of them. Harei, that is, shechochma hi b'chinat or. Wisdom, knowledge, is an aspect of light. Sheyechola la'ir lo b'chol derachav kanam, that can light up a person's path in all their ways, as mentioned above. So we understand that, the second that a person understands a concept that they didn't understand before, it brings an intellectual light. We know that, at least in America, whenever somebody has a great idea in the cartoons, the light bulb pops up. There's a light above their head. And that's exactly what he's saying. That you get the same thing when you start to understand things and when things start to make sense to you, especially on a godly level. Okay. Any questions? No. No? No questions.
Well, the one thing that you said that it just made me ponder, when you said you wanted to be a chazan, you said you didn't have it. You didn't know you didn't have it then.
Yeah.
But what my brain thought is you did have it. You just had to refine it.
I couldn't even read the words. I had no ability to be the chazan at all.
But it was there, but you worked on it, and then it came out.
Yeah, so what happened was I didn't work on it. The rabbi would ask me all the time, you want to lead the davening? And I'd say, no, I'm too scared. And then I would tell myself, just do it. You can do it. Like mincha, like something easy where nobody even pays attention. And I couldn't do it. It's like when I was younger and I was asking out women, I'd look at this woman and I'd say, I can't ask her out. I can't do it. Until I got to the point where I could. And then things started to change for me. My wife, that's how I met her. I literally asked her out on a bus here in Jerusalem. So it was like overcoming that fear. And what happened was circumstances changed. The shul fell apart. We had bought our house because of the shul. We loved this neighborhood. It was still a slum. This street right over here was the worst street in the whole neighborhood, with drug dealers. Right here, Mitzvah Street. Drug dealers, police, people were literally overdosing on drugs on the street, and my kids would walk past dead bodies and not understand what they were walking next to. Like, there were needles on the ground. This neighborhood was insane. And my wife was like, oh, do we really want to live here? I said, yeah, things will change. Back then it was because of Mayanot and because of Reb Shalom. So I said, till Mayanot or Reb Shalom move, I'm not going anywhere. And the neighborhood changed. So the shul fell apart like a year and a half after it started. Mayanot, yeah. And really just like I had to pick it up. So I picked up the shul and eventually moved it into the Matnas, which is the community center over there. And then it's like the first Friday night, and I turned around, who's going to lead the davening? And everybody's like, you. But I don't know how to lead the davening, so I made a fool of myself. And the next week, I sat in my office, I went to Meir Sharim, back then they had cassette tapes. And I bought all these cassette tapes of Shlomo Carlebach, and I would sit and listen to him lead the davening. And then I didn't do such a good job the next time, and the next time, until I got better and better at it. So the lesson that we learned, he's saying that you have to look at the wisdom in everything, the sechem b'kol davar. Back then I didn't know this lesson, but now I know this lesson because now I'm going through a similar thing. And he's saying that if you look at the wisdom behind everything in your life, the light will go off, the godly wisdom. The light will go off, it'll bring you closer to Hashem, and you'll see things that you didn't see before. Make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So now the story has to be really short because we only have a few minutes left. So I thought that we would get to the part about Yaakov and Esav and selling the birthrights. I was going to tell the story. Now I'm just telling the story because we didn't make it there, but I'm telling the story anyhow. So there's a guy who comes to his Rebbe and he says, I don't have any money. I got to marry off my daughter. I've got all these debts. I'm in real trouble. And the Rebbe gives him a coin and he says, you take this coin and take the first business deal that comes your way. So he's walking into town, he's flipping this coin. This wealthy guy who's sitting on the porch of his mansion, he sees this little shlemazel Jew who doesn't like him anyhow. He says, hey, where'd you get that coin? He said, I got it from my Rebbe. He said, and what are you going to do with it? He said, I'm going to take the first business deal that comes my way. The guy says, okay, I'll offer you a deal. I'll sell you my place in the world to come. He says, you got it. It's a deal. Comes into the house, he gives the guy the coin, they sign a piece of paper, Shlomo ben whatever, gives this guy whatever, his place in the world to come. The guy takes it, puts it in his pocket, he's very happy, goes on his way. Comes back home, his wife says to him, no, how did it go with the Rebbe? He said, I made a great deal, great business deal. He said, really, what? He said, I bought the guy's place in the world to come. So she's like, I don't think that's such a good business deal. We've got real problems here. We got to marry off our daughter. We've got all these debts. He's like, nope. The Rebbe gave me the coin. He told me to take the first business deal. In the meantime, the wealthy guy's wife says to him, what was that over there? He said, oh, nothing. I just sold him something. She's like, what did you sell him? I sold him my place in the world to come. She's like, what? So you mean to say when I get to the world to come, I'm going to be by myself? Because you sold it to him? He's like, who cares about the world to come? What kind of stupid thing is that? What do you mean you got to be by yourself? She's like, you buy it back from him. He's like, fine. Goes to the guy. He says, listen, here's your ruble back. Give me back my place in the world to come. He said, nope, no deal. He says, okay, I'll give you 100 rubles, no deal. 1,000 rubles, no deal. 5,000 rubles, no deal. He says, how much money do you need? He said, I don't know. Let's go to my Rebbe. He's the one who gave me the coin. So they go back to the Rebbe. And the wealthy guy says, listen, your chazan, he's a real pain. I sold him. I placed in the world to come. I wrote a piece of paper. I took his coin. I offered him 5,000 rubles. He only gave me one. It's 5,000 rubles. It's a fortune. So the Rebbe says to the chassid, how much do you need to pay off all your debts and to marry off your daughter? And he says, whatever, 10,000 rubles. So the Rebbe turns to the wealthy guy and says, 10,000 rubles, you can have your place in the world to come back. He said, forget it. For a stupid piece of paper, it's not worth it. He goes back home. His wife says, no, did you buy back your place in the world to come? He's like, no, not for 10,000 rubles. She's like, if you don't buy it for 10,000 rubles, you won't have a home because you're going to have to divorce me and I'm done with you. I'm not going to be married to somebody that doesn't care about the place in the world to come. He goes back and pays the 10,000 rubles and gets a little piece of paper back. And now, before when he sold his place in the world to come, it was worth a ruble. But now it was worth much more. Because now he really had a place in the world to come after helping out this fellow Jew to pay off his debts and to marry off his daughter. And from that point on, he understood the light went off for him.
It's a paradigm shift.
And he started giving tzedakah and helping his fellow Jews, really having a place in the world to come. Okay, Yeshua, play a little ding on. And then we'll continue next week with Dr. Shem. I guess this is appropriate.
La
Hashem.
בשורות